This is Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate, and I am your host, JoAnne Jones. I'm a second-generation Miamian, and I am obsessed with real estate, and also living your best life here in the best city, Miami. Okay, so we are back on Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate, and I'm trying to incorporate more of the life and love, and as it intertwines with real estate, because you fall in love, you get married, you buy a property, and then what? God forbid something happens, and then how do you handle the property when you're uncoupling from someone? I think uncoupling is so much nicer than divorce, but they're the same thing. So today, I have my dear, dear friend and mentor and sister from another mister, Melissa Rubin. And I actually work on her team in Compass, Miami Beach. We're both been in Compass going on 7 years now. And we came together about 2 or 3 years. We're about to start, I think, our third, or is it our fourth year?
I think
something like that. Time flies when you're having fun. But I'm so grateful to have you in my life, because she's always there for me whenever I have a real estate question. She has tons of knowledge. She's the most graceful, tactful, elegant woman that I know. And so it's great for me to surround myself with someone like you, because I am constantly admiring you and learning from you. And I always say I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Oh my God, I'm going to blush.
Oh, well, it's true. It's true. I guess, in life, you never really know the effect. We don't know the effect that we have on people. And you just being yourself have affected me a lot. And you're so patient with me. God knows I'm a wackadoo. But okay, so today we are going to talk about, Melissa has a very interesting accreditation. She has an interesting specialty. She wrote a book about what happens when people are getting a divorce, and she specifically handles, and divorce attorneys call her to be the realtor of their clients who are uncoupling and they need to sell their property. And God bless her, because this is such a, most people would run away from being a divorce realtor, and you not only you lean into it, you wrote a book about it. So I'm very interested to know, how did you get into this sector of real estate, and what motivated you to want to take this on? Because this is messy. This is a messy part of real estate. So a lot of people would be like, yeah, no, I don't want to mess with that. I'm gonna deal with commercial, or I'm gonna deal with probate. But no, you're like, yes, bring it on. And you also wrote a book about it. So please, tell us how you decided to get into this sector. And you have a captive audience here. There could be some people that are going through a divorce or thinking about it, and they don't even know where to begin when it comes to dissolving their primary asset. So we got a lot to unpack here. First, I want to know, what is the name of your designation, and what prompted you to get that designation, and why do you have a passion for this area of real estate? Okay, you're up.
Okay, thanks.
I get so excited.
So I've been working with couples that are that decide to get divorced for many years. And when I was 28, firstly, I believe in happily ever after. I have this fantasy that everybody will live happily ever after, until it was me. And I was married. I was 28 in Montreal. You're brought up. You go to college. You meet your husband, you get married, you have children. That was the path that all my friends took. And during the 5th year of my marriage, I recognized it was just not the right thing for me. On paper, it was perfect, but in reality, it was really painful. And so I hired an attorney. He gave me advice, and I had a 2-year contested divorce, thousands of dollars of fees. And I was so young, and all I wanted was a divorce. But the attorneys were all about, you can have more money. This is what you need to do. And so it dragged a lot longer than necessary, and depositions that were just really horrific. So you fast forward, and I wish I knew then what I know now. And if I can make a difference in 2 people's lives to take some of the pain away from what can be a painful situation, I love it. And I think it also makes me a better practicing realtor to be able to mediate between two people and speak both their languages and create what a positivity and what is a negative situation.
So I would imagine you have to be, and I noticed this about you. You are a fantastic listener.
Most important. I think in anything in our lives, whether it's this or just in if you're a couple or with a friendship, but asking the questions and listening and really listening, being present, can make a huge difference in every relationship.
Absolutely. So you actually got an accreditation for this area of expertise. What's the accreditation that you have, and what did you learn in the process of getting that accreditation?
The accreditation is collaborative divorce and real estate. And again, collaborative because ultimately when two people decide they don't want to be together, we all have the same goals. They don't want to be together. So how can we do it in a way that is not painful, where people are not stabbing each other and not being mean to each other in a time when it's probably one of the most emotional in your life?
Yeah, I would have to agree.
So for that reason, and it's to see it and to actually like experience it and to help people do that, I think is just a precious gift.
Yeah, and to have the compassion and the empathy and the skill set for that is says a lot about you. So, I mean, kudos to that. So, as people are thinking about getting a divorce, what are some of the, like you said that you wish you would have known then what you know now. So, what are some of the things that you would, what do you know now for our listeners who are, thinking about buying a property with their spouse or getting married, or, what are some of the tips and tricks or things that you wish you would have done differently?
I would have made sure I knew what all the expenses were in the house. My husband handled that, and although it was many years ago, there are some families where the husbands do all of the financials. The women may work outside the home or take care of the children and be a mom, which is an amazing job, but they don't maybe not know all the financials. So before I was even discussing it with my other, the other spouse, I would want to make sure I knew all of the financials. Even something as simple as the contact for the loan company, which many people don't know. I'd also want to make sure that I knew that everything was as perfect as it could be in the house. And so when I had that discussion with my spouse, that we can discuss what may need to be fixed in order to put the house on the market, if that's what you both decide to do, who's going to pay for that. Like everything needs to be in a document. So again, the emotions are taken out and we're just looking at what's the best solution for that couple. Who's going to live in the house while they are going through this? Are both of them going to live together? Is one person going to leave? What is then each of the person's expenses and how are those going to be shared? What happens if something breaks during the selling period? Who's going to pay for that? So little things that seem quite little can be quite big as we go through the process. And then once they decide that they are going to sell, that potentially one spouse is not going to buy or one partner is not going to buy out the other, then we need a plan for the selling process so that it's very smooth with both parties, and both parties recognize that what the advertising is going to be, what the marketing is going to be, what their expenses are going to be, what happens if there are expenses during that time period, what happens if the house isn't selling quite as fast as we want it to. So that, and we have a plan to know when their exit strategy really needs to be for this particular property.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to a delicate situation like this, you want to have a skilled realtor that is going to be able to come in and ask the right questions and help both parties kind of lay out the game plan, because they just don't know what they don't know. And they're probably scared and angry, and there's a bevy of emotions going on. So we had talked about a strategy. Let's talk a little bit about pricing and how we get to the right price. I think you said it's a step-down strategy. Can you explain that? Because I always love to give our listeners like tips and tricks and how to handle things. Like you might have a situation where one person thinks that the house is worth XYZ, like, let's say $1 million, but really the house is worth 800. You as the agent knows that it's worth 800, but they want what they want. So then what are some of what do you do in that situation?
We're open. I think the most important thing is to try to get as much open communication between myself and both parties. And there are often times when both parties will not speak to each other. So it's really important that you have the exact communication to both parties so that nobody feels that there's favoritism, which could happen. So everything is documented from the realtor's perspective. Everything is documented. And we just talk about how long are you comfortable paying the expenses in this property until it's sold? If they're like they have unlimited money and price is the most important thing, then we look at a longer selling period, but we still will put price breaks into the listing agreement. So we say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I understand you want $1 million. The market is not at the level of your expectation today. So let's put the $1 million, and then in another month, let's revisit. And if it hasn't sold, then we're going to take the price down to $900,000. And in 2 months, $800,000, whatever that number may be, to get it to the point where they can sell. Oftentimes, both parties have attorneys that are working on their behalf, and they will, if one party is being stubborn, they will actually go to court and force them to sign something like that. But hopefully, by just discussing and sharing the future and sharing positivity, we get people to an agreement where we can move forward.
Yeah, I think having the price breaks written into the listing agreement is brilliant, because then the person that wants to put it at $1 million, they feel heard, they feel validated, they get their shot at it. And then if it doesn't work, then you already have a conversation in advance about, okay, if we're still, we haven't had any movement, or we're not where we need to be within a month, then we're going to go ahead and reduce it to this price, and you have that done in advance.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the tips and tricks, one of the things of having a seasoned agent, to understand how to kind of foresee situations, but at the same time giving each person, validating their wants and desires as well, instead of saying no. You can't say no, but you have a backup plan if that pricing doesn't make sense for where the market is at.
For sure, and we can do that with all of our clients.
Oh, absolutely. Another thing that I don't think people realize is that many times within a relationship, there might be one person who makes more money than the other person, but yet that person is living in the house, and then something happens, like the dishwasher breaks, and it's $400. And the person who's living in the house may not have the money to pay for it. So then they have to go to the other person, and they have to pay for it. But what people don't realize is that that other person could pay for it and then get reimbursed at closing, when the person who's living in the house has a little bit more money because they just got the proceeds from the house. So I guess what I'm saying is you could split the expenses and then settle out at closing, which might be something that if you're in a situation, you don't even realize that that's an option.
100%. Everybody keeps a list of their expenses, and then at the end, it's settled. But because I find oftentimes, to your point, somebody is making more money than the other, and they're dependent on that other person. And there's this huge fear, especially with women, of being homeless.
Yeah.
And I think we can all relate to it. And so that is like an overwhelming fear at some points in time. So to be able to have all parties come to an agreement where they know what the proceeds will be at the settlement, and potentially, of course, there may be alimony, there may be child support, other things, but those are discussions in advance of selling, so that people have a comfort level that they won't be homeless.
Yeah,
they'll never be homeless, but it's a real fear.
Well, the other thing, to your point, though, is you're getting married. You're buying a property, and having that difficult conversation around money and finance. I mean, money is such a taboo subject. Even among couples, it's taboo, especially if you're in a situation where one person makes more than the other. But yet you're buying a property. You're both going to be on the title of the property, let's say, perhaps you're both on the mortgage, it, you know, you need to have the conversation and know the right questions to discuss as far as expenses. When you have a property, it's not just the monthly expenses, it's, you know, who's going to, the utilities, how are the utilities going to be split? Or, you know, if something breaks, you know, who pays for that? Or if you want to redo the bathroom, who pays for that? And if you're getting married, one would hope that you are open enough with your spouse that you could have these conversations, even if they're difficult. But, you know, so many times people don't have it. I know that when I was younger, I just didn't even know. I was uncomfortable. I didn't like to talk about it. I didn't know what to ask. As I've gotten older, that has changed. So again, having these conversations from the get-go is, I think, can work things out in advance so you know what to expect. Would you agree?
100%. And even if you're buying property with a colleague or a friend or a family member, it's really important because you're buying the property and everything is happy and you're so happy. And I think one person might have potentially more funds than the other to contribute. But we need to look at what happens at the end if things go awry, if the relationship between two parties severs, if in fact somebody loses their job, how is the property going to be paid for if one party is now paying all the expenses and the other isn't, but yet they're still entitled to 50%. So I find like being comfortable if you're going to go into a project, whatever that may be, like have your get out plan too. I mean, I say it's a divorce, but it's a happy marriage when we're buying a property, whether we're married or not, with a partnership. But it's really important to understand what happens if it doesn't go well, and have it all in a partnership agreement that you can either write yourself, but preferably attorney does that for you, so everybody's protected. And then there's no ifs, ands, or buts. We know what happens if somebody can't afford, if the relationship severs, who's going to get it, what are you going to do, what's the process, are you going to put it on the market, who's going to cover the expenses. All of that is done before, and it makes it so much better.
And, you know, if you're going to buy a property with someone, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can't have this conversation with them, it kind of makes you wonder if they're the right person to be buying a property with.
100%. And the other thing, too, I think is, especially when we're doing things with family, we always think everything's going to be perfect. But with family and best friends is when you need to be the most specific and have everything done in advance, because that's because you love each other. There's so much emotion tied to it, and it can get so unattractive very quickly.
Yeah. They say the best way to get to know somebody is to divorce them because you really see like sides of their personality that you never have seen before. And it's easier to talk about these things when you're in that, you know, excitement in that honeymoon phase. I think people get jammed up on knowing what are the right questions to ask or to like work through. And you know, I would say maybe we could brainstorm this for our listeners, but like what happens if somebody loses their source of income? You know, what happens if one person passes away? What happens if you need a new AC? There's maintenance that has to be done. Who pays for it?
Right. It's always suggested that if you're going to go into that type of partnership, that you create a bank account, that you put in funds for that exact reason. But again, that's part of the document. I feel like each person has to, for themselves, to protect themselves, speak to an attorney, make sure what their rights are, especially what happens if one person wants to sell it and one person doesn't, but the other person that wants to sell can't afford to buy the other person out. What are all the plans? Think of every strategy, and it's okay because if you're doing a partnership, you should know what the positives are and also what you need to do to get out of it.
Yeah, the negatives, absolutely. We were talking before about me purchasing a property with my sister. And you gave me some great advice, you know, like, are you both going to be on the mortgage, or is one person going to be on the mortgage and the other person on the title? And it kind of made me think about, well, what is my ultimate goal here, and how can I protect myself, you know, from anything, you know, life changes on a dime.
Especially in what you at least expressed to me is you're doing this because you want to help your sister. You're not buying this as an investment property together. And
Right.
so sometimes the best laid plans, if things change in your sister's life and you're on that mortgage, you're going to be responsible for that entire finance. And that could be a big burden
Yeah.
for you. And so how do you structure it so that you are helping her? And that the burden is really on her and you're not, it doesn't impact you.
Yeah. Well, I think when the time comes, I am going to sit down with my girl Jody. I will talk to my real estate attorney and kind of work through these things with my sister at the time. So it's so much easier to have the conversation in the beginning of the transaction than to have it when things have gone south.
Right.
Right?
Educate yourself first, then you have viable options that you can share with your sister to see if they are viable options for her.
And the other thing for our listeners is, maybe you don't have a real estate attorney. Maybe you don't have a great realtor that you can call up. And that's why I say, contact me, contact Melissa. Our contact information is going to be available. It'll be in the links below. So you could call us up. I mean, this is what we do for a living. So you can call us and we can kind of work it through with you. That's our jam. So, but the thing is, and it took me a really long time to learn this, and I do it more now than ever, but, when you're going to do big things in your life, take counsel. I didn't know how to do jack all when I was younger. I still don't know how to do a lot of things. And I was so embarrassed that I didn't know how to buy a house, or I didn't know how to do this, or I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to manage money. And I was so embarrassed that I didn't know how to do it because I felt like at that point in my life I should. But the truth is that I didn't. And so that shame kind of kept me from asking people their opinion or how to do something. And had I gotten counsel earlier in life on things instead of just being secret squirrel about everything, like I know what I'm doing, which I secretly don't, I think I could have avoided a lot of heartache. So now when I go to do something, I ask a few trusted friends, trusted advisors, people that have my best interest, whether if it's an attorney or someone who is better at it than I am. And, I get their advice and I avoid making mistakes. I still make mistakes all the time, but I avoid making as many mistakes as I used to.
At least they're educated mistakes.
Yeah.
Right?
They turn to wisdom.
100%. But, friends want to help friends. We all, ultimately, it's in our DNA. We want to help people, especially the people we love. So reaching out to people that love you is the best gift.
I get really excited and I'm impulsive, and I've learned to taper those impulses by, what? Maybe I should run this by something. And I love running things by you, Melissa, because I'm sure that I come to you with my wackadoo ideas. And you have such a way of well, have you thought about this and that? And you say it so gracefully, so nice. And well, how are you going to monetize that? Or how are you going to do this and that? Or, I didn't see a plan in your email for your idea. Is that something that you just forgot to attach, or is that something that you're still working on? It's no, lady, I don't have a plan. And you know me well enough to know that I don't have a plan, but you're kind of so graceful about the way that you kind of make me think oh, maybe I should put a plan together and send it to her and see what she thinks, So also having the right counsel, the right people that you could ask. But if you don't have them, then get them, figure it out. Don't try to do things on your own, people of the world.
Agreed.
Agreed. So, well, we always are. It's always interesting to hear what are some crazy stories of things that have happened to you in these highly emotionally charged times in people's life. What's some of the most outlandish things? Because when people are going through divorce, they are cray. I know I was crazy when I was going through my divorce, so I can only imagine. What are some people love to hear the gossip? What do you got?
Well, I think as a professional, we learn from every experience. But several years ago, I represented the husband. The wife had a restraining order against him. I was never permitted to know where she lived. And when I took content out of the house, I had to meet her in an obscure parking lot somewhere on earth so that I could give her the things so she felt protected.
Wow.
And I would come in and he was very verbally abusive, and he would call me like a pimple on the face of the earth, good for nothing. And this was where he was. There was some mental illness involved, and you can't react. You just have to be calm. But I did make sure I never went to the house by myself.
Right.
Just to be safe, which is, I guess, something we can all learn in general, that we if as women or men, to go together to a property, especially when we're meeting people we don't know, just to be safe. And then I've worked with some very high profile people that were getting divorced that, they just would not speak to each other. And I knew every time I spoke to the husband, it was going to be 45 minutes and he was going to share all the horrible things he thought about his wife in colorful language. And I just knew I had to really allow like an hour for a simple 2-minute phone call, because we had to go through that, because he needed to vent. And you have to just recognize what's really important to the people that you're working with, and just go with it. Not because rational behavior is not an option in these times. Yeah. And we have to always remember what the ultimate goal is, that two people want to decouple and they want to move forward with their lives, and just speak about the short, just a small amount of time left. And but I have many stories similar to that, because in general, most people are contested when they get divorced. There are very few couples that are just so loving and they just know that it's not the right decision for them together. And that's a beautiful way to be. And there are so many options now. There are divorce coaches that people can discuss. You need a team of people when you decide you're getting divorced, to make sure that you're protected. A divorce attorney or a mediator, a divorce coach to help you with your future, an accountant, so that we see what the funds are, what the expenses have been, and just all of those things to protect yourself. And that's perfectly fine and acceptable. We really recommend that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people don't realize that when you're going through a divorce, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, but I was so emotionally charged about everything that I was irrational and I wasn't thinking straight. And I needed like rational people around me to help me sort through it, because my world was falling apart, and it was like my biggest asset, my home, and it was my life partner. So it was like two big rocks in my jar of life, and I wasn't thinking straight, it was too emotionally involved. So recognizing that when you're going through these difficult times in your life, that you're not going to be at your best decision-making mentality, and that you're going to need help through it, I think is one of the most important things.
And also that there's an ending. I think sometimes in anything in our lives, when we're going through something that's causing us an emotion of sadness or anxiety or being frightened, that there is an end to it. It might not seem it at that very moment. And I was given advice many years ago, which was to take a calendar and every day cross out a day and know that in a year from then, it was going to be much better. In 6 months, it was going to be much better. And just knew that there was an end to all of this. And that was very positive for my life.
Yeah. And people, when you're going through, there's a saying, when you're going through hell, keep on going. and when you're going through this, if you're lucky, you learn, and this difficult time in your life turns into wisdom, and hopefully you don't continue to make the same choices and decisions in your life, and you can make better choices and better decisions based on your experiences in the past. I know that I've always been that person that my best friend will tell you too, that I'm not the one that will heed, well, I do now, but when I was younger, I remember she told me one time, hey, listen, we were on a shoplifting spree. Like me and all my little punk ass friends, when we were 15, 16 years old, we were all little shoplifters. We thought it was the coolest thing, And so my friend's like, hey, listen, don't shoplift at Burdines because they have they're cracking down. So what did I do? The next week I shoplifted 2 belts in Burdines, got arrested. Okay. My father had to come and pick up his little punk-ass daughter from the county jail, and I never shoplifted again ever in my life. ever again. But she's like, JoAnne, why did you shoplift in Burdines? I just told you that they cracked down. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I didn't think I would get caught. She's like, bro, man, you're not well. So I'm definitely one to learn. Well, in the past, I learned from experience. Now I learn from people giving me their advice because I got burned so many times. But I was super hard-headed. I'm still kind of hard-headed, but I try to be more, open-minded. And thank God for you. You helped me out a lot with that personally. Like on a daily basis, I call you with my shenanigans, and you always find a way to kind of talk me down from the ledge. There. Yeah. Like, maybe have you thought about this or that? And I'm like, no, I haven't thought about that. But yeah, thank God I run things by you first. So I guess with this, the takeaway is to have the conversations with whoever you're going to be buying this property with beforehand. Know the expenses, understand the expenses, even though you don't really want to understand them or know them. But this is also a way, like, take responsibility for your part in this purchase. If your name is on the title and on the deed and on the mortgage, understand you have a right to know everything that is encompassing. And it might be scary, and you may not know what you don't know, but start to figure it out. Because if everything goes south, you're going to need to understand who's your lender. How do you pay the mortgage? Has it been paid? 100%. How do you go online and check your account? You're affected, because if you don't, then
it's more stressful.
It's more stressful.
After.
And then you're going to want to blame the other person, which, maybe they did do you wrong. People do you wrong, but they also do you wrong when you kind of leave yourself open and you it's not that you don't trust them. You do trust them. You trust your spouse. You trust your partner. You trust people, but you also are entitled to know and understand what your name is associated with.
For sure. And life is a journey, and we're continuously learning regardless of our age. Mm-hmm. But understanding in advance makes it so much better than understanding after the fact.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's that's good. The takeaway would be understand what you're getting into, who pays for what, how things are paid, get your username and passwords on your accounts, and understand just for your own edification. And, if your spouse, just tell them that you want to learn more about the biggest asset that you share and that your name is on it. You want to understand how everything is done.
100%. And it just, 100% you need to do that for yourself and also for peace of mind.
Yeah. And as you go through the process, like, let's say you're in the process of buying a house with your spouse, you're in the process of getting a mortgage. When you're doing it, take the time to ask your professionals around you at that time. Talk to the attorney. Understand the difference between a title and a deed. Understand the mortgage, the lender, who services your mortgage, who owns your mortgage. Like, understand these things. Understand how your mortgage gets reported to the county, and understand what your tax, your parcel number is, your tax ID. And when you're going through it, you have these professionals around you. You're talking to them every day because you're in the process, and start to ask the questions and start to get an idea of what you're getting into when you have them at your. Believe me, when you're going through a real estate transaction, you talk to these people every day. So understand what you got to do.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got anything else?
No,
Any parting thoughts?
I think for me, I'm just an optimist, mm-hmm. and I guess I don't want to leave this podcast by any pessimism, but the more that we can learn for ourselves to make us smarter, and the more our eyes are open in any situation in our lives, the more, I think, easier and a pleasant journey we're going to have.
Yeah. I know for me, I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear, and I didn't know what to ask, and I knew I didn't understand things, but I didn't quite understand how to get clarity. And I had to start with looking at that first and kind of moving past the fear and just looking at it like, oh, I'm afraid to talk to my real estate attorney about what the difference between a title and a deed is, or I'm afraid to talk to my partner about how the expenses are paid and done. And so it sometimes we have to kind of just recognize where we're at, like recognize what is holding us back from doing what we want to do. And just start with recognizing that. Oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I have fear. And start with kind of working through that, because otherwise you'll just ignore things and life will go on. And then the shit will hit the fan one day and you'll wonder how you got into this situation. So,
Agreed.
Yeah, life, love, and real estate. Melissa, thank you so much for coming in and sharing this time with me. It's been a great also getting to know this aspect of you. I work with you every day, and it's always interesting to learn something new about someone that's like next to you. So I kind of knew that you had this certification, but to dig in a little bit more, and you have a book about this, don't you? We didn't even talk about your book. Let's talk about the book real quick.
Oh, so it's really just a little guide for people that are thinking about selling their property during a divorce, and what to look at, and just the steps, because everything is overwhelming. And I find in general, things are overwhelming when we have so much to do and the world is so fast. But when we make our lists of like what is creating the most stress, what will give us the most impact, and we do those things. In this case, it's something simple as staging the property, planting flowers, making sure everything is working, speaking to your spouse about how we're going to settle the assets and everything, because it is the biggest asset you're going to have, and how that's going to be shared. And just like we've talked about during this podcast, it just sort of gives you a step by step, so that it can avoid something of being overwhelmed. And if anybody wants it, I'm happy to send it. And it's just really a gift to try to help in a situation that's stressful.
Yeah, that was my next question. How can people get the book? They would just contact you and you would send it?
100%, and I'll just send it. And if it can make a difference to the process, then it's good.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll make sure to put all your contact information in the links below of the podcast and on YouTube, and we'll make sure that people understand how to get a hold of you. So
amazing.
Thank you so much. And well, you have a website. What's your website?
It's the MJRgroup.com, and there is a section on it that speaks to divorce, and the book can be downloaded from there as well if somebody prefers that versus a hard copy.
And they can always Google you, Melissa Rubin Compass,
100%.
and they could find you that way. You're us realtors are pretty easy to find.
Yes.
Which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but nonetheless. So, all right. Well, listen, thank you. Thanks again for coming in and being a part of this today. I'm really excited to have you here. And that's all I have for you guys today. Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, just anywhere you look for a podcast, you could find Buying Miami. And there's a book involved in all of this. Buying Miami, you could find it on Amazon and under JoAnne Jones. And if you're interested, it's a short little $15 book. You can download it. And it's also a Kindle version. And the audio version of the book is going to be coming out soon. So if you'd rather listen to it, then I recorded it. And that's it. That's all we have for you guys today. We'll see you next week. And we're over and out. Thank you.